we think we're done when we do really great things like police reform, which I worked on the last couple of years. We're like, okay, we've solved this problem. But the truth is, we haven't solved the problem. We still have solitary confinement that is a huge problem, where folks are spending weeks or years in solitary confinement, and they keep changing the name. Yeah. SAU, BAU, DDU. And we keep thinking that we keep changing something, they keep moving the marker. And so I really think that what needs to happen is for the public discourse and public opinion to push us as legislators to say, no, we're not done. That was 5 years ago. That was just the beginning, and we have much more work to do.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you so much for coming to GBH News. We welcome you here into the Yawkey Theater. I think there'll be some other people coming on in, but we wanted to start. We have you folks here who are in attendance, as well as a group on Zoom, so we wanted to make sure we're all on time. So thank you again for making the trek out in this chilly December night. My name's Jenifer McKim. I'm the Deputy Investigative Editor at the GBH News Center for Investigative Reporting here at GBH News. And we're thrilled to invite you to this discussion hosted by our organization and the Forum Network to discuss and hear feedback from the community on our ongoing series, Life After Prison. First, let me start with a humble statement regarding the land we stand on. GBH acknowledges that we perform our work on the ancestral homelands of the Nipmuc, Massachusetts, and Wampanoag tribes. We are committed to learning from, including, and elevating Native Indigenous peoples' perspectives, voices, and languages through our public media mission. So, now to why we're here tonight. I'd like to first start by asking those of you who feel comfortable to raise your hand to tell us if you have someone who's a loved one or you personally have been in a carceral setting and it relates to you. Thank you very much for that. That's why we're here tonight. GBH News puts your experiences in the center of the work we do, and with your help, we will continue to tell the stories that shine a light on the process of reentry. Each year, thousands of men and women return from the state's prisons and county jails, facing challenges in finding work, housing, and in general, reintegrating into the society. We know that people's successes on the outside matter to a cascading number of men, women, children, and grandparents, and the community as a whole. About a third of people leaving state prison return after committing new crimes. Our multimedia series has focused on struggles of prisoners seeking education on the inside and on the outside, staying out of trouble. We've looked at the rising multimillion-dollar state prison budget amidst a plummeting population. We've written about the shocking number of men who are released directly from maximum security prison to the street. And most recently this week, about the particular vulnerabilities of women leaving prison and jails, in many cases seeking to reunite with their children. These stories wouldn't have happened without the input of many of you. Many of these people in this room have contributed to our work, including scores of prisoners, returning citizens, experts, and government officials who talk to us about what works and what doesn't, and what still needs to be done to help people succeed. We now have an exciting night to share stories and talk about what we've written and hear your feedback about what stories still have gone untold, both here at this panel and afterwards in a community event outside this auditorium. So we're looking for a very interactive experience here. I'd like to introduce you now to our moderator, my colleague, Chris Burrell, who's an investigative reporter and writer in this series. We also have State Senator Liz Miranda, Leslie Credle, Executive Director of Justice for Housing, and Emmanuel Noble Williams, who is Senior Director of Programming for Transformational Prison Project. So I'll leave it to you.
Thanks, Jenifer. So I wanted to start this evening. Actually, Noble asked to start this evening with a process that they do at his organization. So I'm going to start with Noble, and then we'll get going on the conversation.
Thank you for that. So everything we do in Restore Justice is an invitation. So I just want to ground us, just centers our mind, our body, a lot going on throughout the day, just to center ourselves, bring us here into this space. And everything we do at TPP is an invitation. So invitation is to close your eyes as you're comfortable, place your feet flat on the floor, hands by your side or on your lap, whichever is comfortable for you. And just take a deep breath in and release slowly. Another deep breath in, hold, and release. And just use this time just to release any stresses, anxiety, worries, just scan your body for any aches or pains. Deep breath in, hold, and release. And just continue breathing at your own pace. And I'm just going to recite a quick quote. If you want to go fast in life, go by yourself. But if you want to go far in life, you go together. Deep breath in, hold, and release. And when you're ready, invitation is always to come back to the space.
I like that.
Awesome. Thank you. Actually, that really helped me. I was feeling a little bit nervous to kind of de-stress. So thanks, Noble. I'm really glad you suggested that. So I just want to say, for me, it's really cool to be out and like meet people and interact with people who listen to the radio that we do and read our stuff online. You know, obviously I go and interview people all the time, but it's rare that I get that kind of connection with the people that we're trying to reach. And I worked for small papers where that happened all the time in small communities. And obviously this is a city and a big region, and it's really special to me to meet people who are following the work that we do. So let's get started. I really want to hear from the panelists, and not for me not to talk a whole time. But I want to start with Leslie, and just kind of, for the people in the audience who didn't raise their hand to Jenifer's question, to talk a little bit about, you know, what are the big challenges that people are facing when they come out of our prisons and jails in Massachusetts?
Stigma, criminalization, discrimination, lack of access to resources like employment. Housing is the biggest barrier, number one barrier. When you have done your time, paid your dues, and supposedly be rehabilitated, you are still treated as you're unworthy. And so we face a scarlet letter. It's like it follows you forever. No one wants to house you. No one wants to employ you. So it causes people to fall back into survival mode. So that's what it's like coming home, is being treated like you're not worthy.
Okay. Anybody else want to add to that?
I could relate. I just want to touch on, so I did 10 years incarcerated. And so I just want to say, like, if you was in the community and someone told you to strip, that'd be sexual assault, right? And being incarcerated, I was told to strip all the time. Any given time, they could look at my body, take my clothes off, and they have full control over my mind, over my body, and then coming home and say, figure out on your own. So my whole 10 years, I was re-traumatized every single day I spent in prison. Yeah. And then so being home, it's like trying to figure out and navigate how to survive, and there's no resources, there's nothing there for you. Even though people come in and say, we want to support you, we got this for you, but it's a myth.
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
It sounds like that trauma that kind of comes with you from inside to the outside.
Yeah, that's what I want to just touch on. You know, a lot of people go in without any mental health, any trauma, and they come home broken. You know, I myself experienced something I never had before, and it put me in a space where I had to get professional help. Of course, I lost my child while I was incarcerated, my daughter. She was 22, and she was killed by gun violence. So not only dealing with the trauma of incarceration, it's always tragic when a mother loses a child. But imagine losing a child when you're locked in a cell and you can't get to your family. I was in federal prison, so I wasn't allowed to go to the funeral. And if I thought that I wasn't going to make it. So when I was incarcerated, I had to hold all that grief in because it's so much trauma and drama in prison that your brain can't deal with both traumas. So when I came home, everything hit me like it was brand new. Even though I came home a year after she was killed, it felt like it just happened. So, yeah, I was broken, and I had to go get professional help to learn how to process that. So.
That's huge.
And the reason why is I just with the professional help when she gets home. For me, I had to wait until I got home too, right? I'm in survival mode my whole incarceration. I'm in the streets, I get incarcerated. I don't got time to think about accountability or the crime that I'm responsible for when my life is at risk every single day. And then when you look for mental health while you're incarcerated, and if I tell them like, yeah, I'm stressed out, I'm having a bad day, that's enough to get you sent to the hole, to be in the hole and sit in there for a long time. Mm-hmm. And also, they don't reflect me, they don't look like me. Mm-hmm. So now I'm incarcerated, and now I'm being stripped, I'm being told what to do. They're looking at my body and they telling me what to lock in. Mm-hmm. And now I'm going through a lot of things mentally. And once I express that, it puts me, now I'm being punished for expressing how I'm feeling. Mm-hmm. So now we hold all that in and we cope with it and deal with it the best way we know how until we actually return back to society where there's no resources or support or help on our journey home.
Yeah. Senator, you tell us a little bit, you come to this issue with some of your own personal experience and then listening to Leslie and Noble, how's that landed?
I just was very angry, you know. So I'm a state senator now, but I like to remind people that I've been a Roxbury girl for 43 years of my life, my entire life. And I grew up in the Dudley Street corridor. If anybody knows that community, there's 2 movies and a book about the Dudley Street corridor. It's an EJ community that after being dumped on for decades due to white flight and arson for profit and redlining, this was the community that my Cape Verdean family came to in the 70s because it was the only place they could afford. And they really rebuilt this community. But my father was incarcerated and all 3 of my male siblings. I'm not even going to get into counting loved ones, friends, neighbors, schoolmates. I lived between Upham's Corner and Orchard Park Housing Development. I had to walk through a war zone to go to school and didn't really realize that this wasn't normal until I graduated from the John D. O'Brien, went to Wellesley. And I'm on the campus of Wellesley, but the wealthiest town. It just smelled different. I just remember I was like, oh, the grass. I can actually smell the grass instead of smelling trash. But I had come from the poorest zip code in the Commonwealth, which was Roxbury at the time in '98, and Wellesley was the wealthiest. And the same month that I walk onto this campus, my brother and father get deported. And my second oldest brother begins another sentence. He'd been in and out of jail most of my life, another sentence in the DOC. So when I was elected in 2018, That was after running after my other brother's homicide. And so I come to this work knowing deeply about incarceration, family separation, and homicide, and really want to leave everyone with one message, and this is why I was so angry. Since I became a politician, most people like to tell me that Massachusetts is a very liberal state, and we're exceptional. We're number one in everything. And I really want the folks in this audience to leave with the notion that our exceptionalism, or our theory of exceptionalism and being very liberal, is just not true, particularly when it comes to the criminal justice system. We have less than 6,000 people incarcerated in our mass DOC. I was the only elected official with an incarcerated immediate family member when I was elected in 2018. And everyone in the carceral system is in the care and custody of the legislature. But when you don't have people who live in your community that is over-policed and over-incarcerated, when you don't have people in your family, what I found was a Commonwealth full of legislators, well-meaning, many of them, who just didn't care about the individuals who were incarcerated because they couldn't lobby them. Right. They weren't coming to their doorstep like me. They weren't visiting the prison system. And I'll end by saying what these folks who have done tremendous after incarceration are telling you is just a fraction of the horrors that not only happen in our Massachusetts DOC, but when they come home. I had a brother who was severely mentally ill when he was released, and he went back into jail immediately after. And I was like, as any sibling would say, well, do you like this place? Do you like jail? And I said, if you go back to jail, I won't speak to you again. Because I'd been living with this since I was 9 years old, and I was angry. So for those of you that have family members, you understand the back and forth of taking care of someone carceral. And what I didn't realize was that WellPath, or whoever the contract provider of the mental health services, my brother told me he got Sudoku when he told folks he was having a mental breakdown. Similarly, sent to the whole. And he's like, and finally he stopped saying anything, and he said, what does a 22-year-old white young woman from a privileged background who just got out of school, well-meaning, can tell me about living in Roxbury and Dorchester my whole life and going through all these traumas? And so my huff was that it's 2023. I've been a legislator now for 5 years, just became a senator, and we're still dealing with the problems that I've made them well aware of since getting into office in 2018.
That's a good segue to what I wanted to bring up next, which is to ask Leslie and Noble that you guys both run these organizations that are either totally run by or largely staffed by people who've been formerly incarcerated. And when my colleague Singer and I were out talking to people for several months, going back to a year ago, we kept running into these small kind of shoestring organizations that were, again, from that community. So maybe Leslie could start, how important is it to have these kind of nonprofits out there, and what are they doing, what are you guys doing that's different from the prisons, the jails that have these reentry departments, or the parole and probation departments?
Well, first of all, we took it upon ourselves to create what different looks like, because we got tired of telling them what we need and no one listening to us. That superiority complex, you have a degree, you're the expert, and so you know what's best for me, right? But my lived experience and knowing what I didn't get makes me the expert, right? Because I know what I needed. And so there's a movement of us, and we created a movement of survivors of incarceration who are paving the way to create resources and being change makers. So what makes us different is we listen, right? we include the voices that have been affected. We also treat people like with dignity and respect. And we also create, what's I going to say? Sorry. Oh, yeah, sorry. We have the lived experience, right? So that's what makes us different. What systems of power is what I call them, are not doing is they're doing the same thing that they've been doing for centuries, right? They don't want to, their policies and their procedures, what worked 100 years ago is not going to work today, right? And so they're afraid to be unique, and they're afraid to take risk, and they believe that they know what's best. So until they, but one thing they do is they try to mimic our programs, right? When a program that we have is successful, they have the resources, they have the power. And so they try to take it from us, right? And so what happens is, instead of partnering with us and resourcing us and using us, if you fund us and you need housing, we're going to house them, right? We're going to do it the right way, but they'll make a program, punitive, right? And they'll put all these different policies in way, and then that program is not what it was. And meanwhile, the program that was doing the right thing doesn't have the resources anymore. So
I want to get to the funding thing. I also want to hear from Noble about what you, on that topic of these, you guys are really about having organizations that's led by formerly incarcerated.
Yeah, so I'll touch on so my AD is Mon Coleman, and our organization started while I was incarcerated. And the reason why is because so much trauma and so much pain we was dealing with. There's no programming that really addressed violent crimes. So we had to create programs for ourselves. It's a level system, a point system. So it depends on how much time you got before you go home. So if I got a violent crime and I got 10 years, 9 to 12 years, I can't start doing programming until I get close to my 12 year. You know what I'm saying? So when we created our organization, it was really focuses on our healing, dealing with our trauma for us, by us, because we could not depend on the system, because modern day slavery, like all across the board, for me. That was just an I statement. And so we knew that we had to create something for ourselves, and also coming home, that no one's going to give me a job. So we had to create jobs for ourselves. And lived experience versus a master's degree, I could get any master I want. I could just go to school and get it, but you can never, ever get my lived experience. And that's the difference. And so no one got to teach me about the system. I survived the system. We survived the system. So we know what needs to be fixed. We know it's not working. But at the same time, when we come home, no one's having these conversations with us on how we could change and make it a better, safe environment. So like we literally do public safety. That's not my job, but we do it, right? Because me, I was gang related at a very young age. I was gang related. I had one of the biggest gangs in Boston. And if I didn't go through my healing process due to TPP and doing restorative justice work, if I didn't do my healing process, I would have came home and continued to turn Boston upside down. And there was no one gonna be able to stop me to do that. And the fact that today, like while we was incarcerated, we got people walking away from gang activity, walking away from selling drugs, and really thinking about how can we have a better environment, a safer environment for ourselves. And we started that in prison and changed the culture. And since we've been home, we've been doing just that.
Senator, I mean, hearing that, because what we looked at was this amazing work that's being done at this level, and there people are really struggling to get the funding, and yet we're in a state where we're spending about $700+ million a year at DOC, little itty bitty amounts going to education, and also we're incarcerating fewer people every year, right? So the census in DOC is down every year, and yet the budget keeps going up. So why is that happening?
Right, because they don't care. So they're racist. So we spend in this Commonwealth over $1 billion on what we call public safety. And that doesn't just go to the DOC, but it goes to the Houses of Correction, the Department of Correction, also state police. Yet very little, I don't know what the percentage is, goes to gun violence prevention and intervention. We were spending millions of dollars in reentry. I myself came to this work working on parole. I want to correct something that was said earlier. A lot of people do go back to jail. We have one of the worst recidivism rates in the state, but it's not because they're committing big crimes. It's because of a technical violations list that says they can't hang out with a felon. I'd go back to jail every time because my whole family's felons, right? Mm-hmm. And so when you think about this idea you can't drink, well, you didn't go to jail for a crime that you were drinking. And so this technical violations piece is just outdated. But I digress for a moment. But what I'm saying is we pump millions and millions and millions of dollars in a system that is not working. I just want to share a couple other facts that when you talked about the longer sentences. So we have 100 colleges and universities in Massachusetts. Many of the people who are incarcerated, if they do have a high school diploma or a high set degree, they should be able to access college. But there are less than 5 colleges that are allowed to create prison education projects. So not only are you waiting to get into an archaic program like computers or barber school or culinary, which are the top schools that they have in our system, but more likely than not, you're not going to get programming if you have a sentence that is longer than 5 years. So there's a long wait list. If you have longer sentences, you're less likely to get in the programs. And then programs and schools who are interested have this this sort of barbaric red tape system where they can get into it. And so what we are seeing is that less than 3% of the budget that we're spending in our, what we call public safety, is spent on education. And what is the best lever? Educating a population. And in every study that you look at, any sector, a more educated workforce or a more educated populace leads to better outcomes. And I'll end by saying that we cannot continue to think that the DOC, which is named the Department of Correction, is actually going to rehabilitate our people. It's just insane to think that way because we're not allocating the resources. Where we're allocating the resources to is to correctional officers, whose population keeps growing. They keep coming to the State House saying to us, we need more money, we don't have enough correctional officers. We've actually had to close prisons. And technically, if we let everyone out on parole that deserves to be out on parole, and if we stop holding people in pretrial detention, we'd be looking at a system that not has 6,000 people, might have 1,500 people, right? Because if we did the right thing. But we can't because it's people's jobs and the unions are very powerful in fighting back the state legislature to not only give them more money, but to not have the policies that we like to have.
But with that massive budget, could you see a way to see that organizations like Leslie's and Noble's or Thrive?
We can have the moratorium and not build a new prison and have $50 million to help fund community-based, evidence-based, highly successful programs like Leslie's and Noble's. Both of these organizations, I have to, or any other legislator, has to get an earmark that oftentimes is maybe 10 to 50,000 or 100,000, which is just a piece of our $56 billion budget. Because we want to help them. But the truth of the matter, they should be line items. If we're saying we're doing reentry work, and I see a couple people in the audience, and Leslie, I'll catapult to you. I helped raise money for reentry and gun violence prevention. I thought I did the right thing. And then I kept seeing people that I helped get out of prison come out into the world, and I was happy. And then they kept coming to my office. And I was like, we just put more millions of dollars in reentry, housing, and they were coming to me for an ID. And I said, we have an Office of Returning Citizens. Why aren't you getting a job or an ID or housing? And they kept coming back. And I was like, well, give me the money. You know what I mean? Like, we're pumping millions of dollars in reentry. DOC is telling us they're doing reentry for 6 months to a year with every individual that is coming out. And then they do the shake and go, where they shake their hands, give them a bus pass, and they're coming back to our communities. And 85% of the people that get incarcerated come back, and they're coming back to communities like Roxbury, Dorchester, and Mattapan. And so it is a broken system, and I think we can revert the money, but we need public will. And that's why I started with the conversation about our exceptionalism and our idealism, which doesn't exist, at least not across the 351 cities and towns that we have, that we could actually take that money, not build a new women's prison, and invest in the things that we actually should do that is working.
There are the exceptions. There are senators like Miranda, who I called crying because the House denied me an earmark. I housed over 220 system-impacted individuals in 2.5 years with the 0% recidivism rate, and they denied me. And it was champions like Senator Miranda, Senator Brownsberger, and Senator Eldridge that allowed me to get, some of the funding that I asked for. So there are the exceptions, but there's not enough. And what happens is you have organizations who haven't done half of what I have done in 20 years, right? That are getting millions in line items, right? They're in the state budget. I can't even get a meeting with someone who's close to the governor. So there's a disparity. The system is racist. Even transgressions, like they have these subliminal messages, right? Like white collar crime. Is that supposed to be better than what's black power crime, right? So, like, you know what I mean? Everything is built on race and supremacy.
Nah, I agree 100%, and we see it every single day because, like, we're going through the work regardless. We survive being in prison. We know what everyone's going through, what they need, and like we're on like boots on the ground every single day. And the fact that we gotta beg for money, ask for money, when like they'll give it to organizations that the money ain't going to it's not going to our community.
Right.
And the people that's getting it do not look like our community, and this is where it goes to. So we gotta learn the game, learn the system, learn politics. We just want to do the work. We're going to do the work regardless. Because like when someone gets shot, someone get killed, that's all families that's going through this. It's not just always on the news, but we're also going through the tears, and we know we're close to everyone that's going through these situations. So it makes it very difficult. Like we started an organization inside of Norfolk Prison. And we created 13 programs, went to 6 different prisons as well as a women's prison, right? And we're not even allowed to go back into the DOC. And they put a grant out and it went to Spectrum. So that's slavery, right? When people were slaves, and you created a radio, you created anything while you was a slave, the slave master owned it. Right? It's the same thing as us being property of the state. We create inside in prison and we don't have no autonomy over it. And now that we're home and we continue doing the work, it's like, no, we're gonna take this from y'all and we're gonna give it to them and y'all gonna figure something else out. But we still gonna do it regardless, right? Because it's life or death for us.
And they don't want to partner. I went to the DOC, asked them to partner with me because I didn't have the resources. And, they turned me down. But they call me every day asking me to house people now. So.
Can I just, a lot of times when I'm in rooms with highly educated people, when incarcerated people and our loved ones talk about it being modern day slavery, it's very hard, right? People are like, no, it's not, really. But when you think about it, the average employee, if you can get a job in the DOC, makes about $5 a week. Am I right?
Yeah,
About it?
100% right.
So a video visit costs $9. We're just thankful that we've been able to lobby that now there's no cost calls, and that is going to happen. Another reason why people go back to jail were the fees associated with parole and probation. When they couldn't get a job, couldn't pay the fees, and now in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, there are no probation or parole fees, which is this we're moving the needle, right? But this idea of slavery, I think everyone should watch 13th Amendment on Netflix. You know, like, it's really interesting to me that right now there is murder in Boston, there is trial 4, and there's the 13th Amendment. Now, the 13th Amendment wasn't based on Massachusetts, but that is to show you that we have had not only a carceral problem, we've had a policing problem, we've had a racial over-sentencing problem with our court system, and all this media attention going to this, and we still are far behind. And I just want to share one fact that I think is important to know, because I like facts and figures, because when my colleagues tell me I'm making something up or I'm just being excited, you know, 3% of spending for sheriff's departments and 4% of the DOC goes to education and program services. Salaries have increased in the HOCs and DOCs by 22 and 29%.
Wow.
And we spend 11% of spending toward healthcare. But the Department of Justice a few years ago released a report that our mental health services are woefully inadequate for the prison population, and people are really suffering. So if I was to go on, I could do an hour show on the ways in which the facts and figures really tell us that we have not only a financial problem, and I like sharing those because sometimes when you're not moved by your heart and a moral indication to make a change, you usually care about spending, right? And my Republican colleagues definitely care about spending. And so if we're wasting money somewhere, they want to recoup that, where we're wasting money with the DOC.
Yeah. You know, as we reported the story and other stories around criminal justice, it's pretty obvious, like the jails and the prisons are unseen. You know, they're kind of down roads, and we just don't see them every day, and the people who are in them or coming out are really stigmatized. And I think it's easy for people just not to care, right? And so, so a question I've asked people through the interviews is why should people care about reentry?
No one is immune. I think many times we think that we might be immune based on our income level or our race or educational level. But when we see with the opioid crisis, for example, many people are penalized, even though we know that this is a disease. When they're committing crimes under being addicted, they're finding themselves in the HOC and the DOC. Women, for example, largely are going to jail for crimes of passion or prostitution or drug use or abuse. And we should all care because they're in a care and custody of the Commonwealth. And I believe that they're somebody's family member. They're a human. They know, they have a story. You know, oftentimes when I enter in the room and I share the story about my family, people don't expect that. You know, if they knew I went to Wellesley, they're like thinking, how the hell did someone go to a top-tier college in the same family where all the male members of that family were incarcerated, killed, deported, or went to jail? You know, that's not something that is often equated with getting a great liberal arts education. And so I just want folks to care. And then lastly, we have a racial problem in the Commonwealth where black juveniles are going to jail 8 times the rate of white juveniles for mostly the same crime. We need to be asking ourselves who gets a second chance. And if we want to be the state that offers someone a second or third or fourth chance, we should be looking at that across geography and also racial lines and economic lines, because when white poor people get affected by the same thing, they're also going to jail at an alarming rate because they can't afford a good attorney or being able to find themselves with the restorative justice, or someone who believes in restorative justice. And so those are the 4 things that I would say are really important when we're thinking about folks that are incarcerated.
And I'll just say, like, I'm a human. I'm not coming back to your community, I'm coming back to our community, right? And so I was incarcerated, like, I'll never forget, my number was W100354. That was my number for the whole time I was incarcerated. But I was a father, I'm a husband, I'm a brother, I'm a friend, and I'm a community member. And so coming back to my community, I pay taxes. And as we come home, we actually pay taxes in prison too. So I just want to make that very clear. When we do certain things on the canteen, they do taxes on. And the fact that we pay taxes and we cannot vote, and the fact that coming home and still paying taxes, right? And what is our privilege that we have? And me being incarcerated, I did my time. I'm accountable and responsible for the crime I committed, and it will cost me my life, right? So that's why we had to create this atmosphere. Mental health is serious. Like, I've been home for 3 years. I'm still struggling. I'm still figuring out how to navigate. For 10 years, I was told what to do, how to do, and I couldn't even think for myself, because if I did, it led me to being into the hole. So now coming back to the community, there's nothing there, no resources, and now I gotta figure it out. And so it's really about, I'm a human being, we're human beings, and we're all still a part of this community, it's our community. And me coming, I did 10 years, I came back to, went to the South, I went to New York's Pieces, and I felt uncomfortable in my neighborhood. Because it did not reflect me, it did not look like me, and now I gotta figure out how to navigate. And that's a lot that's going on for a lot of men and women that's coming home. You can't get housing, you can't get a good job, so I had to be homeless, right? And so there's a lot of things that it should be common sense, but it's not. And I think the prison system is working perfect, because that's the way it was designed, to continue breaking the black and brown community.
No, you also said, and it reminded me of what Kamal Oliver down at Louis Brown Peace Institute said to us several months ago, that people coming back to the community, if they're unstable and all broken, you just said it a little bit ago, you can go back to committing crimes, and that community's less safe, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Well, for me, 1 in 3 families has incarcerated loved one or been incarcerated themselves. What I have seen at Justice for Housing is, once you stabilize somebody and provide a critical resource that is a human right, people have been getting off probation early. Our emergency rooms are no longer being used as a primary care, right? Public safety, our recidivism rate is 0, and that's 229 people over 2 years so far. Lastly, it reunites family, right? 60% of parents have a child in foster care. And so the Department of Child Family Services requires them to have stable housing before they unify that family. So not only are we solving a foster care problem, right? We're stopping that generational incarceration, right? Lastly, what we have achieved is it gives somebody a dignity, right? Their pride back. When they are homeless and you're used to being the primary caretaker, and then you come home and now you're sleeping on somebody's couch, you're with women that you don't want to be with, or a man that you don't want to be with, it causes a domestic violence problem. You know what I mean? So we're solving a lot of problems just by housing people. And the last thing it does, it gives you your pride, your dignity back. I have grown men who cry when I house them, because we're the last resort. Everybody has denied them. When you've come home and nobody wants to provide you housing, and suddenly somebody does, and you're sleeping in your car, that's life-changing.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, I have other questions here, but it's getting time where I really want to hear, we all want to hear from some of the audience members. So we have volunteers here with microphones, and you can raise your hand and they will find you, and you can start to ask panelists some questions from the audience.
No one has
I was like, don't be shy.
Good evening. My name is Claire Barker. Those of us who worked on the criminal justice reform in 2018 have been hugely disappointed that DOC has fought it every step of the way. And I'm interested to hear from the panelists who you think is getting the word out about this absolute scandal and wasteful use of money, and why isn't GBH? What is GBH's role as one of the key media people in Boston? And what are you doing to get the word out, not so much about the success stories, but the scandal and corruption within DOC? Thank you.
Thank you for asking that question. Actually, I think, to just give you guys a little credit, I think WGBH and the Globe has actually, in the last couple of years, really shined a light on some of the things that were happening with the DOC. Like, when I first was elected, the situation happened at Sousa Baranowski, that they said a correctional officer was beat up. Now, within less than an hour, the video of the correctional officer was shown all over our media channels. But what they didn't show us was what happened before, and then what happened when a secret tactical force was allowed to go into the different rooms that had the incarcerated people, just beat them up. Some of them used dogs, kinetic weapons. And so, you know, there seems to be a correlation where they wanted to have the public will pay attention to, oh my God, a correctional officer was harmed, and I'm sad for him and his family. But if you're slewing racial epithets at people and then you're going to beat them up, we didn't get to see that. And so it was very important for us to go in after that to really get a bird's eye view. And you know what I heard when I went into the prison? I went with the speaker at the time, the leader of the House, the chair of judiciary, was that there hadn't been an elected person who had visited Sousa Baranowski in years, right? That's our maximum prison, and yet there hadn't been until this media story broke. So I want to talk about the 2018 Criminal Justice Reform Act just very quickly. It was done before I got there, and I really, Brownsburger, Eldridge, Senator Sonia Chang Diaz, who I took her seat after she just chose to run for governor. I was really excited about that bill, and I was told all about it when I got there. And when I got there, I was like, you know, we were applauding a product that was largely PG-13, right? Because they tried to get so much in that bill that didn't get to the final line, and they thought they were done. And this is the problem with the legislature. We think we're done when we do really great things like police reform, which I worked on the last couple of years. We're like, okay, we've solved this problem. But the truth is, we haven't solved the problem. We still have solitary confinement that is a huge problem, where folks are spending weeks or years in solitary confinement, and they keep changing the name. Yeah. SAU, BAU, DDU. And we keep thinking that we keep changing something, they keep moving the marker. And so I really think that what needs to happen is for the public discourse and public opinion to push us as legislators to say, no, we're not done. That was 5 years ago. That was just the beginning, and we have much more work to do.
I just want to add on. Thank you for that question. So when laws do get passed, and when it comes to DOC, so as we being incarcerated, we advocate for ourselves, but we lead us into getting punished, getting sent to the hole, locked down. When our family advocate for us, now they can't come in and visit us. And so we have to really fight and advocate more for when things are changed. So we need people to really highlight and hold them accountable and say, all right, this passed, now show me how you're doing it. Because when you're in the DOC, they do whatever they want to do, however they want to do it. They know no one's going to come in there and check them on it. And that's why we continue drinking brown water, eating food, rice that got magnets in it. Like, I've been home for 3 years. I almost died 4 months ago. And that's all due to the way I was eating when I was incarcerated. So when they do send, like, they give you a budget for the food. If you go into the DOC right now, right, and the CEOs got their own food, they got real steak, they got real beef, real chicken. Shrimp. And that's all the money that's supposed to come to the incarcerated people. They taking our money for themselves and they eating their best food while we're eating magnets and we eating, drinking spoiled milk every single day. So there's no one that's coming in there, and when people do come in there, it's like, you gotta come
Clean
in
it
there.
with bleach.
Yeah, you got
You can smell it.
Yeah, you gotta come in there when it's like they don't know you coming in and just come in, just drop by, and that's how things are gonna be changing. We gotta hold them accountable. Like, you gotta show me, all right, what is the food that they having? Why is this person? We changed the points to why is this person being transferred down? So it's really we gonna need a lot more support, and not us and our family, people that supporting our family, because we get in trouble for it, and so does our family get in trouble for it. And that's how they retaliate back against us.
Nobody's holding them accountable.
Yeah.
The legislators don't hold them accountable. And not all of them, but there are a small few. But we keep funding them. And taxpayer dollars, it's cost $129,000 to house one person in prison. Mm-hmm. Okay, so we could house, employ a person for that much, put them through college, whatever. But they keep getting the biggest budget. And I believe something like 10% went on reentry and the rest went on incarceration. So more needs to be on reentry than incarceration.
And can I just add and encourage folks? I'm really busy, right? And I have a very needy district. I have the inner city of the city of Boston. And I am forced to have to continuously, we have a good criminal justice reform caucus. We have a great Black and Latino legislative caucus. But we 50 don't need to be the people that we need to speak to. We need to speak to the other 150. Mm-hmm. And that's where you guys come in. Whether you live in Concord, Pittsfield, or P-Town, being able to call your legislator and be like, hey, I went to this forum, I learned about this. Can you tell me what you're doing to address incarceration? We've heard some alarming statistics, and that doesn't happen enough. And speaking as a legislator, we get a call, we get 3 calls, maybe 3 to 5 emails, we're responding because it becomes not a personal issue. But usually you have a lot of power with your state legislator to call them to task on an issue that you care deeply about.
I just want to add, show up. Forget call. I call show up. Mm-hmm. Go to the State House. That's what we do. Go to the State House, knock on doors. They be hiding. They be hiding. Like, trust me, I know I've been there for weeks, months, and hours. So show up. Show up in large numbers, and it's all really support.
Right.
Hi, so my name is Mac Hudson, and I guess this is a question for the senator, because I know the question came up about accountability by Leslie and all the things that's going on in corrections, in which I can verify because I've lived it for 33 years. And so I wanted to kind of ask Leslie the senator to kind of talk more about some of the pending legislation that might help some of the audience members to kind of target their conversation more or less on the question of oversight. I know we have an REICI bill that has an oversight component, and could you explain what that is and why you filed it?
Yep, thank you for that question, and I'm glad you're home, Mac. He's one of the people that I used to visit, and it's great to see you doing productive things. I used to get tired of your auntie calling me, though. No, sir. So when I first started, I got elected. I didn't know how to write a bill. And when I first got in the State House, seasoned electeds were like, hey, Liz, why don't you file this bill? And so I had 2 bills on parole. And I knew about the carceral system, and I just basically filed whatever bills people thought was good for me. Eventually, I ended up filing mostly 40 to 50% of my legislation is on the criminal legal system, all from ending solitary confinement to ending life without parole to reforming juvenile justice to raise the age of incarceration, all because of what I learned by visiting incarcerated people. I started visiting my brother at Sousa Baranowski, and then he eventually went to Shirley, went to Old Colony, and he's home. He's been home for 2 years, which is exciting too. But then I would meet their friends, or people would stop me in the hallways and be like, Senator Miranda, can you put me on your list? And eventually that grew to 350 people. And the group in the organization he's talking about, the AACC, a group of very brilliant men at Norfolk DOC, they're 3 for 3 now. They've actually written legislation that they pitch to elected officials that has led to us to form commissions to get the data and reporting we need to actually get to a point. For example, when we were doing voting legislation, I worked on making sure that access to voting was in the prison system. Although there were 10,000 people who were in pretrial detention or serving misdemeanors, many of them did not have access to the ballot. And we should be furthering access to the ballot in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, the birthplace of democracy, not limiting it. And what we found is that unless they asked for an absentee ballot, no one was educating them on the process. But when the census came out, all those individuals were counted in those towns that they were incarcerated. So those towns were receiving resources for people that were coming back to my neighborhoods without the resources. And so that was one piece of legislation that came from Democracy Behind Bars. The oversight position. I know some legislators feel like, hey, we're in charge, but we haven't been doing a good job. And so there's 2 pieces of legislation. Actually, one came out of this group out of Prison Legal Services, and the other came out of Brownsberger's office to create not only an oversight committee, but an inspector general for the Department of Correction. If we're not going to do right by these people, let's let someone independently serve as a liaison between the legislature, the governor's office, and the incarcerated people. I'll end by saying that you can go to malegislature.gov and you can see any number of bills that any legislator files. There's about 30 that I've filed around the Second Look Act, continuously doing the work of ending life without parole. And I'll end by just saying a startling thing. I had a brother who was murdered. I understand people wanting justice. But when I looked at the racial demographics and the demographics that 1 in 5 people are serving life without parole in Massachusetts, and New York State, for example, is 3 times bigger, and 3 times we have 3 times less people, and we're just incarcerating people in life without parole. Over 1,000 people are serving life without parole. I decided to work with the Sentencing Project to figure why that was, and that was because of over sentencing. Many folks were being sentenced to life without parole when they were not the cause of loss of life in a joint venture or in another crime. And so we have startling data that backs up the why we're writing the legislation that we are. But thanks, Mac, his lived experiences working on this committee along with Prison Legal Services to really push oversight as one of the main pieces of legislation that we should pass.
We have time for one more question.
Sorry. Hi. We have 2 more questions.
Okay.
I do have a mic. Should I go? All right. So when you're describing the landscape of Boston and how hard it is for returning citizens to get what they need, can you explain where the Office of Returning Citizens comes in as a player, and where are they doing good work and where are they insufficient, and maybe where you would like to see them go? Yeah.
Do you mean the city's office, the city's oversee?
Yeah, I can speak to that. We're partners with the Office of Returning Citizens. We just opened a reentry house for men with the Office of Returning Citizens. But I disagree with the direction that they're going right now. They're mimicking our programs.
Yeah.
And the Office of Returning Citizens, as I'm grateful to them for everything they do. You know, I'm not saying anything negative. They do a great job, but what I'm saying is they should be providing resources, right, and partnering with us, not mimicking what we do, because you can't do it all, right? They want to do restorative justice, they want to do housing, they want to do employment. So, and they have the resources. Now they don't have any for us. And so what made us successful is them partnering with me, right? But now it might change. So I believe that they should be our resource for returning citizens, because they're the Office of Returning Citizens, and all the organizations that are led by directly affected people should be going through them to get capital or revenue. The one thing that is, they'll get $1 million, right? And then say we're giving out $1 million to directly affected organizations, but there's 20 of us, right? Or 30 of us. So that $1 million turns into, what, 30,000? It doesn't pay a salary. So they should get more resources and be a partner and a resource for us.
And I agree with that 100% because our organization is led, we got the experience. We've been in prison, we survived prison, so it can't no one tell us what we need. We know what we need, and we're doing the work, so it's more about who's going to back us up, who's going to support us, who's going to bring us to the tables, and really to make the real decisions, make the real changes, because no one could, I don't need to go to no one to ask about what I need to be in prison or what I need coming out of prison. We know exactly what we need, and it just struggle with not getting what we need, to really make real change and really like public safety. And what's shown in numbers, but at the same time is still, let's go to other people. So that has to change. It has to change.
And I just will add, I think there needs to be an ORC in many gateway cities. What I found in my first year, I had a gentleman from Springfield who only knew me, and I'd been visiting him, and so he trekked on the bus to come down. The ORC was in the seaport. I think that's a fundamental flaw. I understood kind of a little bit. I was like, maybe you don't want gang beef, but you don't even know about the gang beef, so I don't know what you're doing. But they put it in the seaport, and I was like, hey, you should put it on a train or bus line in a community. It's a well-intentioned policy, but it has to be resourced. When you have an office that has one person or two people, with the amount of people that are being released, 2,000 people were released in Massachusetts last year. And again, if they do everything right with parole and probation, we might see thousands more, and there's just not enough capacity. So resourcing them, building them in other places, and ensure that the lived experience is modeling what they actually want to see done, I think that could be a successful lever that returning citizens can utilize. But right now, they're under-resourced, underfunded, understaffed, and located in places that is not reaching everyone that needs it.
So I'm going to thank these panelists for doing an amazing job. This was a great discussion. Thank you. I'm going to invite my editor, investigations editor Singer, to come up here and tell you guys about the second half of this program tonight that's going to happen outside the auditorium.
That's me. Greetings, I'm Singer. I am the investigations editor here at GBH and work with these lovely people and very proud of the work they've been doing. And I really want to thank our panelists for a tremendous session. The work we have done here is grown entirely out of our conversations with returning citizens and the organizations that support them. We've had dozens of conversations. We've invited people, formerly incarcerated people, up to our office to come and sit and talk with us and to write on our whiteboard just the ideas of the story ideas that we should be following. And that's sort of been the inspiration for much of what we've covered. We want to continue this conversation. That's why we're here. And to the answer to the question, what is GBH doing? We are doing this not to write stories. We are doing this to be part of this community for a while. So come find us. We've got a table out there. We've got our business cards. We want to hear from you. We want to tell your stories, both of success and, as we're saying, of failure. We actually, someone mentioned Spectrum Health. We happen to have an investigation going on that project. So, like, you know, there's a lot going on. We've done 6 or 7 or 8 stories, and we plan to do as many more as time and resources allow. So there's that. Thank you all very much for this, and let's continue the conversation. We are here for it.